Good day everyone, I'm Joralyn Bandico and I'm going to tackle about the introduction of the classical Christian tradition. So the main purpose of this book is to present the principal ideas and issues in the areas of ethics, offered by the philosophers from classical to contemporary times. This is the third book in a 3-volume series devoted to basic subject matters of the philosophy. The first 2 volumes dealt respectively with the philosophy of man and metaphysics. In metaphysics, certain fundamental themes relevant to all aspects for the philosophic enterprise were discussed. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that studies the fundamental nature of reality, in which it includes the principles of being, identity and change, space and time, causality, necessity, and possibility. So metaphysics has themes centered on the basic question of what it is to be or to exist. It involved in being where such realities as causality, change, and contingency and the foundation of being was seen to be the existence of God. Next is the philosophy of man, treated such central issues for man as the question of his unity in being, his spiritual nature, his destiny, and the character of his knowledge. So the philosophy of man cannot rationally account for why only such questions as individual responsibility, morality, and happiness. It belonged to the problem of the nature of man, and not such questions as truth, world, matter, being, time, and the like. Also, these 2 philosophical sciences are called speculative branches of philosophy because their main thrust is toward finding true and satisfactory answer to the question they raised. What is to be in metaphysics and what is to be a man in the philosophy of man? So, ethics. So we all know what is ethics. It is moral principle that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. Such ethics is mainly concerned with what man should do, with what his action or conduct as a man should be. The practical philosophical study that seeks to find some principles of order for those human actions for which we are freely responsible and over which we have rationally control. So acts of man. Acts of man are actions that are controlled automatically and without need for many choice or direction on our path, which means that these are actions that is voluntarily or automatic na nato mabuhat as a person, murag natural reflexes na nato. So next is the human acts. So human acts are actions that we are free and responsible. The moral philosopher has different definition of human acts compared to psychiatrists and psychology. To be more precise, acts of man is the immediate action or the point where one does it without much thought, and this holds a lot of values within. It clearly shows that strong moral develop in him. Example, jumping into river to save a person drowning without knowing to swim or not. While human acts is more of conscience involved, where he knows and understands the act being performed. Example, before jumping into river, he judged his ability to swim and save. If not, ask right person to do it. So the next topic is John Locke. John Locke was an English philosopher and physician widely regarded as one of the most influential of Enlightenment thinkers and commonly known as father of liberalism. He is one of the most outstanding of Enlightenment thinkers who explain many of the ideas that affects human life in today's society. He is widely known as the father of classical liberalism because of his emphasis on liberty of persons by respecting the authority of the government, Jenkins and John. So the famous English philosopher once observed that man thought creatively long before Aristotle wrote his logical thesis on how to think. The same observation can made about ethics. There were moral long before there was any science morality. So the last is the moral decision. So moral decision is making refer to the decision which require greater examination and searching than others in order to discover what is right and good and what is true in accordance to a person's moral vision and outlook in life. For example are abortion, euthanasia, fornication, and etc. A moral decision is a choice made based on a person's ethics, manner, character, and what they believe is proper behavior. This decision tend to affect not only our own well-being but the well-being of others. The philosophers presented in this book have furnished explicit analysis of these moral choices. In keeping with the plan of this series, this analysis reflects a pluralistic approach to morality.
The key ethical issues. The first key topic to be discussed in ethics is the theory of value. Value is sometimes defined as the object of human desire and striving. Values are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes or actions. They help us to determine what is important to us. Values describe the personal qualities we choose to embody to guide our actions, the sort of person we want to be, the manner in which we treat ourselves and others, and our interaction with the world around us. They provide the general guidelines for conduct. The technical name for a theory of value is axiology, which is primarily concerned with classifying things as good and how good they are. Axiology is the philosophical study of goodness or the worth of something. For the classical Greek, the life lived according to reason is the value, or the end in view proper of human striving. The naturalist feels that the best possible fulfillment of the individual in society is attained through the techniques of the behavioral sciences. The Christian finds value in the good life leading to union with God. For the existentialist, value exists in the authenticity of an individual, taking his life and his commitments seriously and with full responsibility. The next one is obligation. We all experience praise and blame in connection with the actions we perform. Obligation is the claim made upon us by reason that some things are to be done and deserve praise, whereas others are to be avoided and deserve blame. Obligation and rules, like rights, may have an institutional or legal basis rather than an ethical one. For example, at many colleges, there is a rule that makes it an institutional obligation of all students to see the advisor on or before registration day. Students in some universities, but not others, have a right to an institutional guarantee of housing on campus. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher of the Enlightenment, stated that the experienced fact of duty or responsibility implies that we are free. In his words, I ought, therefore I can. The principle according to which an agent has a moral obligation to perform a certain action only if it is possible for him or her to perform it. In other words, if a certain action is impossible for an agent to perform, the agent cannot, according to the principle, have a moral obligation to do so. The technical name for the part of ethics that deals with obligation is called deontology. Kant was a deontologist in that he placed the institution of moral obligation at the very center of his ethics. The third key ethical issue is the natural law. Natural law are all standards of right and wrong conditioned solely by the cultural norms by which one lives. Natural law is a theory in ethics and philosophy that says that human beings possess intrinsic values that govern their reasoning and behavior. Natural law maintains that these rules of right and wrong are inherent in people and are not created by society of court justice. Those who would reply affirmatively are cultural relativists who, like the naturalist, view the emergence of novel situations as a perpetual condition of an evolutionary universe and so cannot grant that any standard based on an unchanging human nature can be adequate. The classical naturalist does not deny that human beings have considerable discretion in creating natural law. Rather, they claim only that such discretion is necessarily limited by moral norms. Legal norms that are regulated by human beings are valid only if they are consistent with morality. Those who oppose the view, including the Thomists and Aristotelians, call on a natural law theory that states that man himself is capable of setting up a standard of morality based on his own nature. The fourth and final key topic in moral theory concerns with virtue. Virtue, or the power for moral action that enables man to act with ease and in order some area of his life. Virtues are attitudes, dispositions, or character traits that enable us to be and to act in ways that develop this potential. They enable us to pursue the ideals we have adopted. Honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self-control, and prudence are all examples of virtues. These excellencies of good qualities have been given emphasis from classical times to today. In order to see how these four topics are of central concern to the five perspectives represented in the readings, we will look at them more closely in the context of each of those perspectives.
Let us now turn our attention to the major topic, which is the classical Christian tradition. So after we have grasped the main ideas and ethical issues. So what is classical Christian tradition? So classical Christian tradition is the first of the five philosophical perspectives and is one with the longest tradition in the Western world. This includes all philosophy carried out by Christians or in relation to the religion of Christianity. Classical Christian tradition emerged with the aim of reconciling science and faith, starting from natural rational explanation with the help of Christian revelation. So the claim that contemporary civilization is based on four pillars, which are the Greek philosophy, Christian theology, Roman law, and modern science, is quite often created. So these four pillars have a unifying element that has helped move Western civilization steadily forward. But science, with its exclusive interest in the material and its ability to radically alter how we live, has also become a means of attack by those who want to undermine ethics, society, and faith. And then Christian philosophy are included the value of Greek philosophy and the profound religious consciousness of Hebrew civilization. So Greek philosophy showed a preference for reason and concern for how to live life well, which accounts for its relevance across the centuries. It was unafraid to call Greek paganism into question, which almost certainly helped make Greece fertile ground for Christian missionaries and proved surprisingly adept even at theories that in later years would come under the healing of science. Example, Democritus on the composition of physical matter. So it is believed that the first principle are atoms and empty space of the universe. Then, since we've already discussed what classical Christian tradition is, let's get into the nature of classical Christian tradition. So the extraordinary and brilliant contributions of the Greeks must be prioritized in our study of moral philosophy. First is Socrates, 470-399 BC. He is one of the originators of a moral system, declared in the Apology that the unexamined life is precisely the life not worth living. Socrates means by this statement that an unexamined human life is devoid of meaning and purpose. To become fully human, we must use our highly developed cognitive faculties to elevate our existence above that of mere beasts, because without thought, we are nothing more than animals, simply eating, sleeping, working, and reproducing. It states that when a person does not examine his life to find his true self or excellence of function, that they are ignoring their true self and that a false life is not worth the time to live it. So an examined life will find its true self of what its function is and what to perform its function well. So the significant value of Socrates' contribution in his confidence in the mind's ability to attain a degree of moral wisdom in the conduct of life. In his opinion, man could and should apply reason to the pursuit of happiness. Man should also hope to develop some standard by which to guide himself on the path of self-actualization. The second philosopher is Plato 427-347 BC. In his dialogues on the Republic, the Laws and the Gorgias also made solid contributions to the formation of our moral consciousness. It means that it treats happiness in different ways as a state of perfection. The exact nature of this state is not easy to pinpoint. However, because it is based on the metaphysical propositions that are at least prima facie both hazy and out of the realm of ordinary understanding, there is not, as there is in Aristotle, an explicit determination of happiness as a self-sufficient state of the active individual. Instead, at least in some texts, Plato's moral ideas appear both austere and self-abnegating. The soul is to remain aloof from the pleasures of the body in the pursuit of higher knowledge, while communal life demands the subordination of individual wishes and aims to the common good. But the Greek masterpiece of moral inquiry is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Nicomachean Ethics treats moral problems in terms of the capacities as well as the potentialities of men to do good. In Aristotle's most important ethical treatise, the Nicomachean Ethics, he sorts through the virtues as they were popularly understood in his day, specifying in each case what is truly virtuous and what is mistakenly thought to be so. Here he applies an idea that later came to be known as the golden mean. It is essentially the same as the Buddha's middle path between self-indulgence and self-renunciation. Thus, courage, for example, is the mean between two extremes. One can have a deficiency of it, which is cowardice, or one can have an excess of it, which is foolhardiness. Moving on to the third philosopher, Aristotle 384-322 BC, he positioned the idea that happiness is the final end of human aspiration and that can be arrived at only by use of reason. Happiness depends on ourselves. More than anybody else, Aristotle enshrines happiness as a central purpose of human life and a goal in itself. Happiness itself is living in accordance with reason and virtue. Although not all of Greek civilization could be characterized by a strong devotion to reason, the influence of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle was so great that today we think of the Greeks as having more concern with function of the reason, the need for order, and the value of philosophical analysis than almost any other people. That is why happiness is final, because we find it worth pursuing for its own sake and not for the sake of something else more than any other activity. Furthermore, the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas broadens and enriches the Greek perspective. He was obviously carried with the real possibility of reason could achieve solid and respectable result in the field of morality. Being moral or good is necessary for having self-respect. Self-respect is necessary for happiness. Therefore, being good is necessary for happiness. Other than that, St. Thomas Aquinas also referred to Aristotle as the philosopher and analyzed his ethics in the long and splendid commentary on the Nicomachean Ethics. St. Thomas Aquinas lived at the height of the age of faith. So his faith, however, never reduced his trust in man's ability to reason and his responsibility to properly employ it. He was able to push his own academic endeavors to the very edge because of his convictions that truth is one and whatever is truly true in faith and science can never actually conflict. He was also no mere echo of the Greek mind, where he instilled the Christian faith in the Greek mentality and expanded on areas where the Greeks were less specific, such as the necessity for self-love because God loves all men. It is critical that people mimic him by loving themselves properly. Aristotle's moral theory does not include divine providence. whereas Aquinas does. So that's all for the classical Christian tradition.
This is Ladiely Manos, the reporter of the next topic, which tackles about the perspective and the key issues. So there are 4 perspectives, and these are the value, obligation, natural law, and virtue. And today I will discuss the value and obligation. First, we have value. So the theory of value is the philosophical study of goodness or value in widest sense of these terms. So value is sometimes defined as the object of human desire and striving. There are 2 questions of what value was answered in 2 ways by the Greek and Christian philosophers. So first question is, what is the supreme value in the classical Christian tradition? And the second is, what do these philosophers see as the object toward which human beings strive and that they desire? So first, they were concerned with finding as a subject that the faculty in man that is his highest or most valuable faculty. The term faculty here is meant as the power of acting in some determined or specific way. The eye is the organ or instrument for that faculty of seeing. So the Greeks and the most of the Christian philosophers were convinced that the most valuable faculty in a person is his intellect, or the ability to reason or generate ideas or concepts and make sensible decisions. So the second answer concerns the object that will most fulfill the faculty or power of reason. In seeking to establish that the most valuable power of man is his reason, we have Plato and Aristotle who asked what there is in man that must be satisfied before he can be happy. So they all agree that man can only be properly gratified by something that is unique to his spiritual nature. They saw man's special satisfaction to be necessarily a fulfillment of what is special in man. So Plato and Aristotle took mind or soul as a representation to them what is best in man. So the presence of intelligence, the ability to comprehend the universe and articulate that understanding in thoughts and sentence was viewed by most philosophers in this tradition as the primary source of human contentment, fulfillment, and happiness. So we can summarize the Greeks' wisdom by quoting John Stuart Mill, a 19th century utilitarian philosopher, who said that being a sad Socrates rather than a satisfied pig would be preferential. So in other words, man as a subject simply could not be satisfied without taking into account the perfection of his reason and his power of free choice. So being a man without exercising responsibility or seeking the value of an examined and reasonable life is to live without using one's highest and most distinctive power. Closely related to this intellect is the will, whereby one actively desires the good that one has come to know is the result of the ability of the intellect. So man is ordered to the position of the true and the good. So the Christians concurred with the Greeks in insisting that man cannot be satisfied as man unless his highest seeking, that of his intellect and will, is satisfied. Thus, a rational character appears in the ethics of this tradition. As the Greeks and Christians viewed the world and man, they classified beings in a hierarchical manner. So the topmost of the classification of beings are the men. The Greeks and the Christians saw man as having the ability to reason abstractly, allowing him to perfect technique and gather knowledge that would result in the arts and sciences. So this reasoning ability is superior to that any of stone, plant, or animal. It is the defining feature and vital trait of man. Second to man are the sentient animals, so which has a greater ability to live because of its powers of locomotion, imagination, instinct, and organic sensation. So third belongs to the plants, which has the quality of perfection, has the power of reproduction of its kind and for growth from a germinal to a mature state, and known for its ability to engage in nutrition, to master the mineral elements, and to observe them into its own identity. Lastly are the minerals, or the 4 primary elements of earth, air, fire, and water. So the Greeks and Christians see the minerals as the lowest beings in the world because these elements lack, among other things, the essential quality of life, a quality of perfection which plants possess. In metaphysics, Plato and Aristotle were concerned with those eternal realities that all other things in the universe either sought or imitated. So in Plato, this immutability, this eternal character and permanence is seen in the eternal ideas of justice, truth, goodness, and beauty, though it would be incorrect to think of Plato as naively supposing that these ideas share a kind of spatio-temporal existence in another world. So man achieves his ultimate value when he is able to see what truth, justice, and beauty are in themselves by an act of direct intuition. Socrates describes the steps that lead to this revelation into beauty itself in the Symposium. So for Aristotle, man's fulfillment is gained by contemplation, but Aristotle did not specify any one object that will itself be the perfect object of contemplation. So we can see from the discussion of value that spiritual character, particularly intellectual knowledge, is the most significant subjective capacity that a man possesses for classical and Christian philosopher. So now, let's proceed to obligation in the perspective on the key issues. So obligation, or the position of duties, is defined as a moral demand imposed by man's reason in assessing his own life situation. So man sees himself obligated to do certain things like paying back debts, dealing fairly with his friends, and etc. So reason itself does not create this demand, but rather by reason man is able to recognize what is due to others and to himself. A right is a moral power that imposes an obligation on another to respect it. So as a result, every man with his basic needs for food and survival has a claim to one's others' recognition of those needs. So correlative to the knowledge of obligation is the fact of freedom of choice. One cannot be held responsible for doing something that he could not prevent under any circumstances. Similarly, one cannot praise anything that was done automatically and without any freedom. So this condition of freedom in the face of obligation is an essential ingredient in the classical and Christian tradition. So it is not enough to act in a certain way, one must also determine whether or not to follow one's rationality. So though reason may demand, choosing a reasonable deed is not always the result. The classical tradition also emphasizes the spiritual and interior quality of free essence. So, Socrates affirmed in Phaedo that his limb, if left to themselves, would carry him fast from his prison, but because of his beliefs, he was able to make an interior spiritual and voluntary commitment to stay there. So, in his description of obligation, Aquinas restated in a Christian context much of what was central to the traditions of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. For him, the ultimate source of all obligation is the eternal law. So, the divine plan for all creation that proceeds from God, but God chooses to make man such that he can, by the use of his reason, come to recognize his obligations in life. So, in the structure of the moral act, Aquinas saw another sign of the close way in which the human creature is able to participate in the plan of God. Man is not a passive recipient of pre-made rules, rather, he uses the power of reason to bring himself to know and construct the law.
Thank you, Ladiely. To continue, this is Darylle Matero, the last reporter of Group 1. Now let's proceed to natural law. Aristotle and Aquinas believe that man is capable of discovering objective, universal, and necessary moral laws. Both parties view the law as a type of ordering wherein the activity pattern of a being reaches its perfection. They were convinced that the beings below humans, such as animals, plants, and minerals, are guided to their perfection or proper final phase of existence by a fundamental principle. This basis of action is referred to as their substantial form. In Aristotle's perspective, he believed that law has moral purposes. Many consider Aristotle as the father of natural law. Aristotle held that what was just by nature is not always the same as what was just by law. There is a natural justice valid everywhere with the same power and not existing just by people's thinking this or that. And it appeals that it could be made to it from positive law. People are not all good, and education cannot guarantee that they will be good because the only thing that can assure the proper conduct of all individuals is the law. Human, in addition, can realize their full potential by employing reasons. On Aquinas' perspective, on the other hand, he viewed the world as being created by God and understood that humans are rational beings capable of using their intellect to comprehend the world. By extension, God enabled humans to reason in a natural way to make ethical choices. Aquinas viewed the first principle of natural law as good is to be done and promoted and evil is to be avoided. Simply put, natural law asserts that what is good is natural and what is natural is good. He further posited that the fundamental principle of natural law is that we should do good and avoid evil. Aquinas showed that human beings can discover objective moral norms by reasoning from the objective order in nature, specifically human nature. While Aquinas believed that this objective order of nature are in fact ultimately grounded and established by God's intelligent willing of the good of creation, Aquinas understood that one need not know that God's providence underpins the objective order of nature. Thus, whether or not one believes in or rationally proves there is God, one can recognize and be bound by the natural law, for according to Aquinas, it applies to all people at all times and in some sense is known by all rational humans, though of course they do not but should always act in accordance with it. Amidst their sole perspectives, they both agreed on how every single creature, things, and activities has final end, goal, or purpose, and each thing aims at some good. Aquinas agreed on Aristotle in thinking that an act is good or bad depending on whether it contributes to or deters us from our proper human end, to which is the telos or final goal at which all human actions aim. The telos is eudaimonia or happiness, where happiness is understood in terms of completion, perfection, or well-being. Achieving happiness, however, requires a range of intellectual and moral virtues that enables us to understand the nature of happiness and motivates us to seek it in a reliable and consistent way. On that note, in order to attain happiness, one must act in accordance with what is good in human nature, such as the virtues of justice, temperance, courage, and practical wisdom. Virtue in the Greek or Christian definition consists of excellent traits that make man more perfect as a human being. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle defined numerous qualities and their extremes. In his perspective, Aristotle explains what virtues are in some detail. They are dispositions to choose good actions and passions informed by moral knowledge of several sorts and motivated both by a desire for characteristic goods and by a desire to perform virtuous acts for their own sake. Each virtue governs a different sphere of human life, but all virtues are conducive to happiness. Aristotle maintains that virtuous acts lie in a mean relative to the situation. He further emphasized that by honing virtue of good, people will likely make the right choice when faced with ethical challenges. In his perspective, Aquinas devoted a large section of the Summa Theologica to a discussion of virtues. A cursory glance at the second part of it reveals a host of virtues that are indicative of human goodness. But there are essentially four virtues from which Aquinas' more extensive list flows. These virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. Aquinas refers to these virtues as the cardinal virtues, and they are the principal habits on which the rest of the virtues hinge. To put that simply, in a another way, each cardinal virtue refers to a general type of rectitude that has various specifications. For example, the virtue of prudence denotes a certain rectitude of discretion in any actions or matters whatever. Any virtue, the point of which is to promote discretion with respect to action, will be considered a part of prudence. Similarly, temperance concerns the moderation of passion and thus will include any virtue that seeks to restrain those desires of a more or less insatiable sort. Moreover, Aquinas thinks that cardinal virtues provide general templates for the most salient forms of moral activity, such as commanding actions, to which is prudence, giving to those what is due, or justice, curbing the passions, or temperance, and strengthening the passions against fear or courage. In Plato's Republic, the four cardinal virtues are wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. These reflect the nature of the soul, and Plato argues for different conceptions of the unity of the virtues. He always denies that one can possess one virtue without possessing the others. He first supposes that all virtues are one, since they are identical to knowledge, and this goes with an analysis of the emotions that ties them closely to judgments about what is best. In the Republic, he ascribed different emotions to three different parts of the soul and associates distinct virtues with justice as a virtue common to all three. Philosophers possesses all these virtues together. Even common men who can achieve a virtue only to a limited degree must achieve the other virtues to the same degree. All men can be happy to a degree within the Plato's utopia.